That summer, the river learned my name. It was a breath of heat and honeyed dust that hung over the fields behind grandmother's house. And the country road led us to the bend where the willows kept their own quiet counsel. I was 10, maybe 11, wearing shorts that grew thin at the knees and a shirt that always smelled of sun and lemon soap. The world seemed large and generous then, the kind of size you could step into and be swallowed by if you wished. In the mornings, she would set cups on the saucers with a careful clink, and the air would taste of tea and soft bread, as if the room itself remembered better days. My sister Maeve and I would set out our day with a plan that was half improvisation and half siege. We would fill our pockets with marbles or bits of string, whatever we could carry to the river, and return with a story to tell, or at least something to show for the hours we forced into laughter. The summer was a long, unspent coin, and we spent it on 1,000 small acts of assumption and daring. Nico, the cousin who seemed to have the weight of a river in his chest, lived just beyond the edge of the lane. He and I would wander toward the bend where the willows leaned over the water like old guardians, their leaves brushing our cheeks as if to remind us of the surface's secrets. The river carried the day's heat and carried back our voices as if to say, "Remember this, the way you lean toward a flame and do not yet know how to hide from its truth." On a day when the sun wore its bright armor, we decided to build a raft from scraps, 2 old crates, a length of rope, and a plank that had once served as a cattle trough lid. The smell of pine sap clung to the wood, and a cheap white paint had peeled like old petals, leaving rough patches under our fingers. The air tasted faintly of rain that had never fallen, a promise somewhere beyond the horizon. Maeve watched us from the yard with a mixture of skepticism and amusement, and grandmother, in her apron, said nothing but pressed a jar of lemonade into Maeve's hands and sent us on our way with a blessing that sounded like a soft hymn. We laid the raft on the water where the current was gentle, where the breeze spoke in little silhouetted whispers across the surface. The raft creaked, each sound a small confession, the nails whining, the rope tightening, the plank shifting with our weight. We found our courage in the rhythm of the river's breath, in the way the water parted and then came back together as if nothing had happened. The raft drifted in a lazy arc toward the bend, and the fields along the bank blurred into a watercolour of gold and green. The first splash of water against our calves was a shock, cool and bright as a saved breath. The river, in its patient way, carried us forward with a steady nudge, and for a moment we forgot to fear disaster as the world narrowed to the present crispness of splash and wind, and the rough texture of wood beneath our palms. The air tasted of pine and sun, and something greener, wet grass, and the faint, sweet sting of fear that keeps a life on its toes. Then the storm came, not with drums of thunder, but with a sudden hush. As if the sky paused to listen to what we had started. Clouds bunched at the horizon, grey and stubborn, and the river took on a new voice, the sound of rain on water, the way rain makes every surface look softer, as if the world itself were becoming teachable again. The wind came in from the far field, not harsh, but insistent, lifting the raft with a polite but firm insistence that we should not mistake gentleness for safety. The current quickened, and I felt the river's old memory push against us, reminding us that adventuring with Maeve found a long, stubborn stick and managed to lever the raft free. Nico steadied the planks with his legs like a sailor bracing a ship in a squall. And I repeated a line grandmother once told me. about how the river decides whether you get to keep your skin and your heart intact, and how you must keep your mind clear and your hands ready to work. We did not sink that day, though we might have, and when the sun broke through the rain and painted the willows gold, the world seemed newly minted, as if even trouble had learned something from us about holding on. We rests on the river bank after, our clothes damp and heavy, our shoes packed with river sand. The raft lay half submerged in the current, a shy creature returned to its element, and we sat in the grass with our knees drawn up, and the sound of distant laughter drifting over the water like a memory made audible. The storm's edge was soft now, and the air carried the clean scent of rain-washed dust. We ate the lemonade grandmother had pressed into our palms earlier, and Maeve pressed a piece of cloth to Nico's sleeve, where the water had left a pale, stubborn stain. We spoke little, the way children do, when the world has shown them something true, and when truth sits on the tongue like a stone to be weighed and not spit out in a hurry. That night, after the chores were done, and the stove's slow rhythm filled the kitchen, we found a bottle cap with a note folded inside. A small message wrapped in wet river paper that someone, a child much younger than us, perhaps, someone who had come before our time and left a hint behind, had cast along the shore. We opened it with the reverence one gives to a thing that might hold a map to your own sky. The note spoke of courage and the longing to see what lies beyond the bend, and about how memory is a boat we carry into the future, even when we fear the current. We did not know whose handwriting it was, but the voice inside it felt a little like grandmother's, quiet, steady, and full of care for a world that does not always deserve such tenderness. That night, I learned something about the river that didn't come with the sun's glare or the sting of rain. It was this: the river does not reward the reckless, nor does it punish the careful with the same measure. It simply prepares you for the moment when you must decide who you are, and what you will do with what you have learned. The raft was not a triumph so much as a test, and we passed it not by the luck of not falling in, but by the willingness to hold one another up and keep moving forward when fear pressed in like a hand on your throat. It was a small early schooling in trust, in the quiet power of teamwork, in the stubborn hope that after a storm the world can still be beautiful. In the years since, whenever I have walked a road that feels long and dusty and the traffic of life grows loud and hurried, I hear the river again. Its voice a blend of lullaby and challenge, its surface a mirror that never lies. It reminds me that the world will ask much of us, that we will be asked to stand together, to mend what breaks, to listen with patient hearts as the days pass through our fingers like coins slipping from a palm. The raft's memory sits in me like a small bright coin, something I can flip in my mind whenever I need a reminder that strength is not loud but quiet, that courage often wears work-worn hands, and that joy can be found where the current moves with a patient, faithful undertone. We grew older, as all things do, collecting stories like shells along a shoreline. Some days I forgot the specifics, the exact color of the water, the exact shape of the clouds, but I never forgot the feeling that day gave me. The sense that life, in all its ordinary grace, can be trusted to teach you what you need if you are listening with both ears and a humble heart. I learned to slow the pace of my thoughts, so I could hear the soft echoes of kindness people offered each other in the small acts of daily living. I learned to measure time not by the clock on the kitchen wall, but by the rhythm of the river, by the length of the shadows in the late afternoon, by the way the air would cool just a touch as the sun slid toward the horizon. And so I carry that summer with me, tucked inside the chest where the heart keeps its more stubborn truths. Time moves on, days lengthen and shorten, rows of seasons blur into a single mosaic of familiar faces and familiar places. Yet the memory of that raft and that storm, of the laughter that followed and the lemonade that tasted like a small triumph, remains a gentle, patient guide. It reminds me that the world's beauty does not demand grand gestures. It invites quiet acts of care, small decisions to keep faith with one another, to keep listening even when fear is loud, to keep pointing toward the bend with hope rather than trepidation. If I am old today, if my hands tremble and my eyes grow soft at the edges, it is because I learned to hold on to something durable in a world that begs for speed. The river taught me that meaning endures not because it shouts, but because it travels with you through your days and the days after, letting your heart remember the safer, kinder map you have drawn by living through it. And for that I am grateful, grateful for the summer when the river learned my name, for the small raft that did not fail us, for the old and patient voices that taught me to listen, and for the quiet fear that steadied itself into courage. Time may pass, but meaning endures. And in through all the slow turns of aging, I still hear the river breathing, still feel the old wood's memory in my hands, still see the willows lean into the sun as if to say,